My name is Will, and this story will center around a friend named Tyler. When I was a kid, particularly in my younger years, I lived in a bad neighborhood and have three stories about that. One being I witnessed a sexual assault in progress. The second is someone tried to break in my house with a knife. And the third is my sister's friends thought we were out of town, as my sister posted it on her MySpace, and they broke our door down and chased me and my mom to her room. But today's incident hit me totally different. I used to go to his house all the time. I would fill my backpack up on Friday morning and ride the bus home with him and stay the weekend. It was great. I didn't have a bad life. It was great. But we didn't have a lot of money and lived in a bad area. Now, Tyler had a nice house, family still intact, went to church all the time, and it was just different for me. It felt like an escape from my life, even when my life wasn't horrible or I wasn't trying to escape it. He lived on a country road and had neighbors not terribly far, but not super close either. Probably 3 to 4 house widths between them all. He had a big property that was long and went back a lot. He had like 3 sheds that looked like little log buildings or cabins that were very homemade and creepy looking at night, and of course surrounded by woods in the back. When everyone would go to sleep at his house, everything was off. No TV, no lights, pitch black, silence, except for his mom's box fan. So when wandering around the house or outside when we weren't supposed to, it got creepy understandably. Finally to the actual story. One night we were up playing Kingdom Hearts on PS2, our favorite game, and once we had to turn it off we couldn't sleep. So we went roaming around the house, seeing what we could do, quietly. In his kitchen is lined with windows behind the counter and faces the backwoods, the sheds, and a big glass screen door as well. So we went to go get some Mountain Dew, which we weren't supposed to have late at night, and when he opened the fridge, I swore I saw a light in the shed closest to the house, which was still kind of far, but right out from where the woods got a little thicker, so you could see it clearly, and once I noticed it, I shut the fridge door, almost on his hands, and when he got mad, I told him why, but there was nothing. So we get the Mountain Dew, and when he closes the fridge again, I talk him into waiting at the glass door with me to show him I knew I saw something. About 10 minutes later, a light went on, more like a flashlight with the swaying. You could see it bouncing around inside and reflecting off the 2 little windows in that shed. Very small and very rustic looking shed. It freaked us out and we ran to his room and talked about all the possibilities and eventually fell asleep. Next weekend, like usual, same circumstances happened and I stayed at his house again. So, after his parents go to sleep, we wait a while and make our way to the windows. When we got there, we didn't see anything. We went and played some games on 0 volume and went back out probably around 2 a.m. When we went out, we didn't see anything still. For some reason, we kind of talked each other into going outside. I honestly can't remember what for, but I imagine it had something to do with that shed or whatever. We went out the sliding door onto his porch, which is very high off the ground. We were trying to be very quiet, even though his parents' room was on the other side of the house. We got on the porch, but I was too scared to go off of it, and wanted to go back in. But once I was about to tell him I wanted to go back in, we heard and saw the door to the shed open. Coming out was a very skinny, old, disheveled-looking person. Probably a homeless old man, but to us kids, it might as well have been Satan. We didn't move at all. I guess because of fear, but the guy started walking towards us. Not that he saw us, but something snapped me out of it, and I just remember screaming and running for the door. And when closing the door, seeing that man running after us. We didn't even lock the sliding door, and we just booked it for his parents' room. We woke them up. It made us turning on the lights. He decided not to come up to the house, but they got up. He looked around the house, shined a spotlight from the glass doors, and the door was open. But they reassured us it was probably an animal that got in, and they would look tomorrow. As you could tell, we barricaded ourselves in his room and never slept until near daybreak. When we finally woke up around noon, his dad was outside cleaning around the shed. He found a pocket knife and a bunch of wood that was carved into things. His dad brushed it off as already being there, just probably because of all the old random junk around. But I remember the wood looked relatively new, like it was a light color and not darkened or aged. But it was brushed off to our imagination, probably due to the fact we always played like that. There was a few more times when it got close to dark we would hear something, like a whistle, but it might have just been a bird or something. But of course we freaked out each time. I don't know what that man was doing in there. I don't know why he was walking around at night and started heading for the house. Now growing up, I don't think it was Satan or something creepy. I think it was a homeless old man that was probably going to try to break in to steal food or something, or maybe something worse. Whatever his intentions were, or whatever happened those nights, it always stuck with me, and still to this day freaks me out. I don't know if some of the things were our kid brains trying to put two and two together, or if we really did hear that man whistling to us. But that is the one thing that happened to me that gave me some bad PTSD around the woods at night for a long, long time. I was 11 years old at the time of this story, living in an apartment complex situated on a street with an ongoing construction. Needless to say, they often tapped into the electricity supply, and power fluctuated quite a bit. Therefore, the streetlights often served no real purpose, specifically in the winters when evening dawned on us with pitch black darkness. That is relevant, so keep it in mind. From what I remember, it was a weekend I was supposed to spend at my friend's house. For an 11-year-old me, this was an exciting prospect, having been loaded with schoolwork the entire week. I was to spend what I believed to be Friday night sleeping over, and spend the entirety of Saturday at her bungalow, to return home that very evening. What made it even better was the fact that her parents had an event that they could not avoid on, and therefore trusted us to stay alone in their 2-floor house the entirety of the 6 hours they were gone. Back then, the idea of spending a whole night alone with my friend was great. No interference, and a whole 6 hours of games and movies on their huge TV. As it turns out, my friend had other ideas. I arrived at her house just short of 8 p.m. It was already pretty dark out, and her parents had waited for me to arrive before telling us about emergency contacts, dinner, and such. They also reminded us to get their 4-year-old Labrador inside, as the weather was acting up and his kennel had a few loose panels which leaked when it rained. This is also an important fact to be noted. After they left, we watched a few cartoons, had dinner, and were chilling in our living room playing cards. That's when my friend Sid had the ingenious idea of exploring a fenced plot of land a few hundred meters down the street that she resided on. There was no construction happening in there, so what little of that area didn't have shambles was overgrown with plants and weeds. We got the dog inside, leashed it to its long chain that allowed it to roam within reason, got the keys, and left the house to make the short 10-minute trip. At this point, it was about 10 p.m. In retrospect, this is where we still had a chance to avoid this particular encounter, but being the curious and daring 11-year-olds that we were, we ventured anyways. Rather uneventfully, we arrived and set to climbing over the 2-meter wall. Luckily for us, the wall was broken enough in places to make good holds to carry us over. Once inside, Sid suggested that we sit a few meters away from each other for as long as we could till one of us was too scared to do so. We faced each other and walked backwards till there was just enough light to see the general silhouette of the other. After what seemed to me like a good 10 minutes, I saw Sid's hunched form rise and start to walk towards me. She seemed to be walking rather fast and in a haphazard manner, jumping over rocks and such at a daring pace, even getting cut by some thorns in the process. She came up to me, and just as I was about to laugh and call her out on being scared, she told me to get up because she needed to go feed Shaggy. I remember being really confused because her parents had already filled his bowl with food, and he had his water thing which he could operate in case he was thirsty. But I saw her face, and let me just say, I have never ever seen her this way. She was so pale. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. So without asking questions, I said okay, and we made our way back over the wall, albeit in a tense manner and rather quickly. The moment my feet touched the ground, I felt Sid grab my arm and straight up just start sprinting down the street. To put things into perspective, I had a bruise from the way she grasped it for 2 weeks straight. So we ran like hell was chasing us, arrived at her house and went in through her front yard fence gate. A towering metal gate without bars, and she told me to unlock the front door while she deadbolted the metal gate's various locks into the ground that the two gates to each other. At this point, I was starting to panic, but we got into Sid's house, and then Sid proceeded to run around the house, locking and closing all possible windows and doors as well as pulling the curtain shut. I was very confused as to why she was doing this, and so was her dog, who stood there and followed her around while she did so. After about 10 minutes, she came back into the ground floor living room, and with a very scared expression, explained to me that the reason she did all that was because while we were sitting apart, she happened to glance away from me to a few meters to my right to see another human silhouette crouching in the bushes. She thought she was imagining it until it moved closer to where I was sitting and seemed to be unaware that my friend was watching them. She did not want to startle me or the person, and so she made up having to feed her dog as an excuse to get out of there without alerting the person still crouching there. After hearing this, I was quite shaken and we hugged for a few minutes, deciding not to tell our parents, as they had very much warned us not to go out of her compound. We did not want this to be the last of our time alone together, having fun, and so we peeked out the window into the street, which seemed to be empty as far as we could see, and proceeded to put it behind us as excitement took over our minds once again. I would love to say that that was the end of it, but what happens next has stuck with me till date, and I hold fear of that situation from that point forward. To give you an idea of the layout of her compound, her house was surrounded on two sides by a lawn, and the lawn was then surrounded by a wall some 2.5 meters high. The wall had one entrance, which were the tall metal gates I talked about previously. The house itself had all windows all around the perimeter, as well as two potential entrances. The first being the front door, while the second being a door to the small attached space next to the house, which was made of see-through metal, like the kind of which metal fences are made of, but stronger. This space had a metal door with a lock, only accessible from the inside, as well as a door, which was on the wall this space was attached to inside the space. However, this door only had a deadbolt on, and was made of light wood. This is also of importance. So an hour or so in after the incident, we were upstairs in her air-conditioned room playing games on her computer and talking about whatever it is 11-year-olds talk about when we heard the dog bark downstairs. It was growling and seemed to bark at random intervals. Keep in mind that her dog was a very friendly Labrador who rarely ever growled or barked aggressively. My friend went to get the dog upstairs to her room, and after she returned, she informed me that the dog was standing near the front door growling at it, and that it took her quite a bit of effort to get him upstairs, as he kept trying to go back there. We were really confused, as this was unusual for him to do, and thinking that a stray dog may have caught his attention, we decided to go into the balcony attached to her room that gave us a view onto the front lawn and a part of the street directly in front of the house. Instead of seeing what we assumed would be a stray dog or a stray cat, we looked down to see a person standing very still on her lawn and in front of her front door. In the limited light, we could make out heavy layers of muddy-looking clothing and a head full of hair that looked very matted. The dog was with us in the balcony and was whining to be let outside. We crouched in our balcony, and right as we were about to discuss what we should do, we heard what sounded like the front door rattling, as if someone was trying to open it with the handle. We creeped back downstairs, only to realize that this person had now moved on to the window next to the door and was trying to open that. The realization hit that he was trying to find an entrance into the house by going around the perimeter. Just as we were about to creep back upstairs, my friend grabbed me again and in a hushed tone told me that she had forgotten to lock the attached space door in her hurry before. We both looked at each other and paled as we realized that it would gain the intruder easy access into the house, as the inner door had nothing but a deadbolt. At this point, we heard the windows rattling behind the house, nearly 3/4 of the way back to the front again. The attached space door was a few meters away from the front door, and we were lucky that he had chosen to go around the other side. She told me to wait by the inner door with the dog while she went outside and bolted the metal door. She then informed me to close the door as soon as she returned, and that if she was caught, to let the dog outside and to close the inner door as discreetly as possible, as to not give myself away. We were both terrified, and since we had no time to argue about it, I stood guard at the inner door while she went to the outer door, fumbled with the lock, and returned inside, practically running as quietly as she could. We closed the inner door, and just then we heard the outer door rattle harshly. Had she not gone there and then, there was a big chance that we would have no choice but to hide in her house, had he found his way in. After he tried opening all doors and windows, which took a while, as he was doing it quite intently and forcefully, we found our way back upstairs and went back into her balcony to see if he had gone away, as we had stood still near the foot of her stairs for a while, listening for any further activity. As we looked down, we saw him once again standing in her front lawn. However, this time, we could see his head was tilted back, and it felt like he was looking right at us. However, we knew that it was far too dark for him to be able to spot us, as along with closing all the windows and such, we had proceeded to kill the lights in her room as well as draw the curtains as to not let her little bedside lamp escape the blinds. He then started giggling in the quiet night and proceeded to go down on all fours, crawling around the front of the house while his laughter grew. In retrospect, we should have called the authorities at this point, but being the terrified 11-year-olds we were, we did not want to get into trouble for not even being able to follow simple instructions. He did this for nearly half an hour, only to stand up once again facing the street, and then climbed on top of the kennel in the corner, up onto the top of the wall, and jumping down. We still stood in our balcony waiting to see if he would return, but an hour or so passed where he didn't, and that was the last we saw of him the entirety of the night, till at around 2 a.m. her parents returned. The next morning they were very confused as to why all the doors and windows were closed on such a pleasant night, and why there was mud on the front doorknob. We said we just wanted to play in the dark inside the house, lying about the actuality of the situation, and to this day I do not think the man has been caught. To anyone who's wondering how he got into the lawn inside the wall around the house, we checked it out the next morning. It turns out he climbed over the wall at the side of the house by using boxes he must have found somewhere. We also went to the abandoned plot in broad daylight, while a lot of activity was occurring on that road, but did not see anyone there as far as we could spot. This happened back in 2016 when I was in the 10th grade. It was a Friday night during the beginning of October, and me and my friend Gavin were going to have a sleepover that night and play video games all night. The sleepover was going to take place at Gavin's house, since he had the bigger basement, and in general, he just had a bigger house with a bigger backyard. It was probably around 6 p.m. when we finally decided to order some pizza, using money that his mom left for him to use to do exactly that. Shortly after ordering the pizza, we were both confused when his back patio light turned on. We looked out through his back door, which was made up of that thick and heavy glass, allowing us to see right into the backyard, where we saw nothing. It's probably just a squirrel or something that ran across the yard, suggested Gavin. While we were waiting for the pizza, we decided in the meantime to play some Black Ops 3 on his Xbox One, which was located down in his basement. It should also be noted, his basement has a door that leads out into his backyard also. Anyway, we were taking turns playing games in online multiplayer when our attention was drawn away from the TV and towards the backyard when once again the motion sensor light in his backyard went off again. "Why's the pizza guy coming in from the back?" I asked Gavin. Gavin got up from his seat and looked out the screen patio door while I focused my attention back to the TV. That was until I heard Gavin shout, "Oh shit! Turn off the TV!" I looked at him startled as I watched him start to shut the blinds on the doors, leaving me confused as to what was going on. "What? What's out there?" "A clown! A fucking clown is out there! That's what!" At first I thought this was just some stupid little Halloween prank that Gavin was pulling. Then I realized it actually might not be a joke, as earlier that week, we'd been hearing all about clown sightings popping up around the US. Gavin and I rushed upstairs and out of the basement, where once we got to the living room, Gavin immediately went to grab the phone and call the police. While he was doing that, though, I did something so stupid, because I quite hadn't grasped the reality of the situation yet. I pulled back one of the curtains, and right there, separated by only a thin piece of glass, was a clown. A clown with a smile so big and devilish it chilled me. And this wasn't a smile from a mask. This individual appeared to have actually painted his makeup on his face. I screamed as I ran to Gavin, which startled him, after which we ran away from that window into another part of the house. The whole time, Gavin is still on the phone to the 911 operator, telling them what's happening. The cops came about 10 minutes later and did a sweep of the property only to find nothing. One of the responding officers told us that if the clown were to appear again, call back and they would show up as soon as possible. With the cops now gone, and us not wanting our night to be ruined over some jerk, we once again went back to playing video games for the next 2 hours. It was close to 2 in the morning by now, and by this point, I was feeling pretty tired now that all the excitement, so to speak, had calmed down, and our sugar highs were finally wearing off. I chose to just lay back on the couch while Gavin continued to play video games, until eventually he paused the game. "Do you hear that?" "Hear what, Gavin? This ain't funny if you're trying to scare me." "No, I'm being dead serious. Do you hear that?" I sat up from my position of laying down on the couch and listened. It sounded like humming, coming from outside. Gavin was the first one of us to start looking out the windows, but didn't see anyone or anything out there. Then he did something that even though he's my best friend, I still think he was stupid for doing it. He opened the back patio door and went out onto the deck. I followed him out there, asking him what he was doing, only to see him looking off at the tree line in a frightened gaze. "What?" I asked. "Look." Gavin then pointed out into the yard. Hiding within the shadows of his yard was the same clown from earlier, this time holding what looked to be a machete. At this point, I'd like to say I yelled some kind of threat at him, or at least ran back inside the house. But just like Gavin, it seemed I myself was also locked in this trance of fear. We both watched, frozen, and unable to move as the clown emerged from the darkness, before he waved at us with the machete. Then, he let out the most heart-dropping laugh I've ever heard from someone. It was the kind of laugh you expect someone to have if they've been smoking for so many years. We were still paralyzed with fear as the clown laughed, before he turned his back to us and ran off into the woods behind the house. It felt like a lifetime before I felt myself come out of my state of fear, though it was probably like 5 seconds or so, before I myself had to break Gavin out of his state of fear, before we both ran back inside the house, locked the door, and once again called the cops. Just like last time, the cops once again showed up, did a sweep of the woods and surrounding areas of the neighborhood, but couldn't find him. We never did see or hear from the clown again after that. However, it truly was the most terrifying experience I've had in my life.